by searching for Autoline in iTunes, Stitcher, or YouTube.
Autoline After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, solutions for your journey, and by the Michigan Economic Development Corporation.
Hello, Gary.
John, how are you?
Doing well. You too, I hope.
Absolutely. 90 degrees outside and nice and cool inside. So That's a good thing. Right. I know that later on in the show, we're probably going to talk about the JD Power IQS results. And it just so happens that on June 30th, 1953, the first Corvette rolled off the line in Flint, Michigan.
Oh.
And it just so happens that the Corvette is the #1 vehicle in the IQS study. What a coincidence.
That's pretty amazing, because it's still a new car. Usually it's the older vehicles that have been around for a number of years that are at the top. So good for Corvette.
Absolutely.
Well, we got a great show here. Why don't we bring in who else we've got on, including Mark Wallace, the CEO at Clarios. Hello, Mark.
Hey, John. Hey, Gary.
Mark, how are you? And
good to have you here.
Sebastian Blanco.
And Sebastian Blanco, too. That's right. Hello, Sebastian.
Hello, John, Gary, and Mark.
Hey, Sebastian.
Good to have you guys here. So, Mark, I'm sure most of the viewers tuning in now, we've been promoting it, and they're kind of interested. They maybe know that you're a battery supplier or maker. Give us your elevator pitch. What is Clarios?
Yeah, I think first, just to ground the name Clarios, used to be Johnson Controls Power Solutions business, was actually purchased 3 years ago by Brookfield Business Partners out of Toronto. So we've been Clarios ever since. And as the world's largest producer of low voltage mobility solutions in the world, we actually find ourselves as the only true global player in this particular space. And we've done that really through years of partnering with our automaker customers to make sure they've got, the right low voltage solution for the powertrain, but then making sure we can take care of those aftermarket customers, right? That 1.2 billion vehicles that sit in that car park. So we're quite proud of who we are and what we've got to offer to both our automaker partners and our aftermarket.
Mark, just to be clear, so if somebody were to pop the hood of their vehicle right now and look and see the lead acid battery, that very likely may be something that you guys had manufactured.
More than likely, because we really see ourselves as the only global player. And reality is we're about 5 to 6 times larger than our nearest competitor. So in the US, if you go into the retail aftermarket, if you know the name Diehard, Duralast, that's all Clarios behind making those products for our key partners.
Mark, you make lead acid batteries, obviously. Anything else beyond that? Lithium? What else are you into?
Well, great question. So as you can imagine, we partner with virtually every automaker in the world. And so we've been bringing whatever solutions they needed for their powertrain throughout the last, more than 60 years, providing the right solution. And what we've done in the last, call it 15 years, as automakers are looking for ways to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, we introduced the AGM battery, or absorbent glass mat technology, to automakers, mostly in Europe to start with, to satisfy the need of start-stop vehicles, because you have a very high cycle rate of turning the engine on and off, and a conventional lead acid battery was just not up to the test. So we developed and launched that AGM technology about 15 years ago.
So we got to stop here. Explain that. I mean, that's a pretty hoity-toity term, absorbent glass mat.
It is, and if you can think about it, it uses the same basics of a lead acid chemistry battery, but the reality is there's actually no fluid inside the battery moving around. So the amount of energy storage and power that battery brings is significantly higher than a conventional battery. And the good news about it, it's actually being adopted at a very high rate on the new vehicles. So the new electrified vehicles or the hybrid vehicles and autonomous vehicles, we see this technology going to be a well-used technology by automaker partners for the coming 10 plus years as well.
So when I was doing a little research, that the lead acid battery is a flooded battery, which means that it has fluid inside. You're saying that the AGM battery is fluid free?
It is. So it offers to an automaker, since it has no actual liquid inside that can spill out during an accident, as an example, it gives the automaker freedom to place that battery in different locations in the vehicle that doesn't require it being a crash protected zone. So it offers that flexibility for an automaker. But what happens is it's a very robust and very difficult process to actually impregnate the individual cells inside of an AGM battery with the right chemistry in order to provide that power and energy density it needs.
So, Mark, I was kind of astonished to learn that electric vehicles actually have a low voltage battery in them, and I guess it's mostly lead acid that's being used. Explain, because you'll do a better job of it than I ever could. Explain why electric vehicles need a totally separate low voltage battery that's probably lead acid.
Yeah, so great question. Every vehicle in the world, regardless of its powertrain configuration, has a low voltage network in it. And so the easiest way to describe what actually happens from an internal combustion engine to an EV are quite different when it comes to the application needs. So we all probably still have internal combustion engine, and really that battery's there to start the engine. I mean, that's what has been designed for over years. But in the EV, it's a whole different scenario and much more oriented around much higher power demands on the EV low voltage network, as well as providing functional safety. So when you bring your electric vehicle in your garage and you charge it, when you plug it into the charger, our low voltage network disconnects that high voltage traction batteries, and that's done for safety reasons. And so while that vehicle is disconnected from the high voltage batteries, the low voltage battery is taking over and providing security, infotainment, but more importantly, like over the air updates, as we all know is coming more common. And you want to make sure you have an uninterruptible power supply to make sure that it doesn't get disrupted during that transmission of that data set coming through. So once you decide to drive your electric vehicle, the low voltage network actually engages the high voltage traction batteries. And then as the vehicle is driving down the highway, we act as a buffer. So if you're doing power steering, you got your air conditioning on, and it's more power than the high voltage can put out, we actually step in and buffer that as well during the drive cycle. But really, John, probably the most important things we're hearing back from automakers is when there's a problem with the high voltage network. So if there's a problem in the battery itself, inverter or a DC to DC converter, that high voltage network is no longer available. And so the low voltage network now steps in and provides the driver what it needs to safely get the vehicle off the highway. So power steering, power brakes, etc., to make sure the occupants can remain safe. And if you think, John, that a lot of the vehicles of tomorrow have more autonomous feature sets on them, you can think about you going down the highway, down I-75, and maybe you're not driving the vehicle. And so if there's a problem now with a high voltage network, automakers want to make sure there's a very robust process or system backing that high voltage network up to make sure those computers that are processing that autonomous drive cycle continues to remain online. And so we're actually seeing a significant amount of demand from automakers for EVs and autonomous vehicles, not only to install one, but two of our AGM batteries in the case of more autonomous vehicles to make sure there's redundancy there as well.
I feel like I've seen somewhere, either in concept form or in some pre-production version, and I apologize for not having all the details quick at hand. I don't know if you've been experiencing the same brain fog that some of us have, but I feel like I have seen vehicles where the traction battery either has a section reserve or somehow it ties into providing the energy that a 12-volt lead acid battery usually provides. How does that fit in with this? Do you still recommend that when auto engineers design vehicles sort of in that way, that they still have a 12-volt separate battery, or do you see the technology evolving to a point where at some point the separate battery won't be needed because the traction battery will be able to provide the separated power that you're talking about?
Yeah, it's a great question. If you think about driving electric vehicle down the highway, most all the power is coming from the high voltage traction battery. So it's actually being stepped down through DC to DC converters onto the low voltage network itself. So really, the low voltage battery as we produce today is really in standby mode most of that drive cycle, only to support the power demands if they rise to a certain level. The problem remains is when you need to disconnect those high voltage batteries, like for charging as an example, or if there's an accident on board a vehicle and your airbags go off, those high voltage batteries have to now be disconnected for safety reasons for first responders and the occupant. And so that low voltage network now steps back in and provides the SOS or door unlock, et cetera, for the vehicle. So I think for the most part, you can do it from a pure step down of the voltage from a high voltage battery, but it's not a very practical, nor would be a functional safety solution I think most automakers would gravitate to.
Mark, the battery that you're using in hybrid vehicles, plug-in hybrid vehicles, electric vehicles, now is this the same sort of AGM battery that one might have in their ordinary internal combustion engine car, or are you guys doing something differently? Is there a different technology that would be more optimized for these electrified vehicles?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and kind of get two answers. Back the first this year, we announced a brand new portfolio of AGM products that were specifically designed for hybrid and electric vehicles called the Clarios XEV portfolio. So these have been designed both from a energy density, energy power, as well as a size format to fit virtually any type of hybrid or pure electric vehicle. And that's followed up by what I would say is probably one of the most significant advancements when it comes to battery technology is we have developed the first only AGM battery that actually has internal cell monitoring. So a lot of the problems you have with the old conventional 12-volt batteries is you have a sensor just measuring voltage across the two terminals and trying to predict health of the battery. The reality is you could have a cell that maybe has a particular problem that could be a problem during the drive cycle. So we've developed the first ever, as I mentioned, ability to monitor the internal workings of an AGM battery and use our lithium-based electronics and software capabilities now to be able to communicate to the vehicle our state of health, making sure that when they go to autonomous drive cycle, that they have the power they need as a backup solution. And then also we're able to provide, letting the operator know or the fleet owner know, hey, it's time to go change your battery before you have any unscheduled downtime in your vehicle. So this has gotten a lot of attention from our automaker partners because now we provided that real world state of health of the battery. Now the vehicle can trust and depend upon when it goes into autonomous mode, as an example.
Mark, big lump of lead in the car. It's heavy. What are you doing about taking mass out, or can you do that?
Actually, in our Clarios XEV portfolio of products, you'll actually see different battery configurations that actually have smaller packaging, so less weight for our AGM battery based upon the particular automaker's needs. So we've developed a portfolio that can support the need of the vehicle, but also made it more compact than historically that you've seen in the marketplace. And we've used, because I think, Gary, you asked, 15 years ago, we also were the first producer of lithium here in the U.S., right? Over in Holland, Michigan, we started out producing lithium-based cells, and we actually built high-voltage traction batteries originally. And then, obviously, strategically for us, we've mostly focused now on low voltage, but we've got very intimate knowledge of what the battery needs from a software and electronics perspective, and also more importantly, how it needs to interact with the vehicle, especially the high voltage traction battery. So we've actually taken that knowledge and we've actually put it into our low voltage lithium portfolio we have, and also into our low voltage AGM technology.
Mark, to what extent does the low voltage battery in an electric vehicle provide the capability for, let's call them accessories versus traction?
Yeah, so in conventional BEV architecture, the low voltage battery, when the power's off, so the vehicle's being charged, is providing anything that's going on in the vehicle is provided by that low voltage network. Only time it steps in during the drive cycle with a significant event may have occurred with the high voltage traction batteries or some type of failure, it steps in to allow power steering, power braking, and all those features to make sure you can safely guide the vehicle off-road. It does not step in and drive the wheels, as an example.
Mm-hmm.
One of the big topics, obviously, in the automotive industry these days is the supply chain situation. What is it or is there anything in the AGM batteries that you can foresee will be a problem or already is a problem to make more of these? Or any materials that are particularly harder to get now in 2022 than they were last year due to whatever, whether it's, Russia's invasion of Ukraine or just general supply chain shutdowns in China. There's all sorts of reasons why things are hard to get these days, but I don't know what's in your batteries that might be hard to get, or is it relatively common materials that you need to produce these?
Yeah, Sebastian, great question. And when you look at how Clarios is structured around the world, we typically produce in a region where we can consume as well. So we produce all over the world to satisfy the needs of the automakers and the aftermarket. But probably the most important thing when you get into an automaker looking at deciding, in some cases, between a lithium low voltage solution and a lead acid solution, that lead acid battery, we can recycle up to 99% of the materials in it and reuse it. And there's nothing like that on the planet, right? It's the most recycled product in the entire world, and we are the largest recycler of lead in the world as well. So this provides us kind of a total 100% renewable resource that we can continue putting into new vehicles and new batteries. And I would, in cases, probably maybe in your vehicle today or an aftermarket battery, the lead could be 50, 60 years old in that vehicle. So we feel very good about our ability to reuse a resource, and it has a significantly less negative footprint than it does in some other chemistries, just because once it's out of the ground, we can continue using it over and over.
Mark, that's a great point. There's talk that farther down the road with lithium batteries for EVs, the traction batteries, I'm talking a couple of decades down the road, the hope is out there that you'll just be able to mine old batteries for the raw materials. How much of the lead can you use? I mean, 50, 60-year-old lead in your battery? I never heard that before. That's amazing. Can you guys just get all the lead that you need from old batteries?
We can. And the vast majority of our lead, over 80% of our lead that we use in batteries is recycled materials. So, and that includes not only just the lead, we're actually able to take the plastic, the box is built in, and reuse that polypropylene as well. So it's a great resource. And it's why it's been so consumed by automakers, because it gives them, 100% renewable resource when it comes to, taking care of our environment. But you mentioned lithium, which, look, we all have been very involved in lithium. And given our vast recycling network that we have around the world, we are definitely engaged today in looking for solutions to help find the right opportunities with right technologies to be able to get lithium recycling to some scale in the future. So we've been working with the Department of Energy, several different companies that you would know in North America, really to figure out a way to get that recycling network set up for lithium-based chemistries. And it's a big challenge, as you can imagine, of moving those high voltage traction batteries, getting them safely discharged, getting them broken down and getting them into actual recyclable conditions so that we can actually reuse that black mass. So we got a lot of effort and energy working on that as well, but it's probably not going to pay a lot of dividends until, post the end of the decade.
Mark, I'm curious, does the AGM battery recycle as well as a traditional lead acid battery, or are there some differences there?
No, if you come to our recycling plant, you'll see a conventional lead acid battery fall into the crusher, and right behind it's an AGM battery. So actually we can get the same amount of reusability from the AGM battery that we get from our lead acid technologies.
Interesting.
You talked about, the AGM batteries, especially being used in hybrids. If you go back a decade or two, there was a lot of talk in the industry of going to 48 volt, and usually those hybrid systems are 48 volt. Where do you see that standing right now? I mean, there was a belief at one time, if you go back 20 years ago, everything was going to go 48 volt.
I think, John, if I step back 5 years ago, I think there was going to be a lot longer tail on hybrid vehicles than most people think today. I think the cycle for hybrids is going to be much shorter, as most every automaker is moving to full battery electric vehicle powertrain. So I don't know when there's a big change in the actual numbers, but we're expecting that vast majority of automakers will move to be EV platforms versus hybrid platforms.
Gotcha.
Have you thought at all about expanding into traction batteries? I mean, that seems to be, what everybody's talking about now.
Gary, actually, no. And point blank, no. And the reason is because you see a tremendous amount of capital being deployed, a lot of people putting capacity in around the world, trying to solve for the high voltage battery needs of the future. The reality is the low voltage battery that you would use from a lithium-based chemistry is not basically the same chemistry. So a lot of what you see, like in a Tesla as an example, especially in North America, is either NCA or NMC chemistry. So a couple of different chemistries. But in a low voltage battery, there's really two primary ones that you would use. And one of them's lithium iron phosphate, or LFP, or lithium titanate. And so when you step back away, given our vast knowledge around low voltage networks, integration capabilities, we want to continue being the world's leader in that space, because there's a huge amount of demand coming, both with new automakers as well as just the growth in the car park. So we're going to keep our focus on what we do best, which is, knowing and how to integrate a low voltage network for an automaker.
You know what else we don't hear about lead acid batteries is battery fires.
Well, you're exactly correct. And as I mentioned at the start of the show, with the AGM battery, the freedom for an automaker to place that anywhere in the vehicle, it could be on your seat, could be in the trunk, wherever they want to put it at, gives them, because you don't have these issues you may experience with other chemistries. And if you think about a lithium-based chemistry, and the reason is smart, is because you need to have software and cell monitoring to make sure that the charge rates, or how the battery is being charged by each individual cell, and how that energy is being released needs to be monitored very closely with software. And more importantly, it's also there to monitor for any type of thermal event that may occur inside of a lithium-based battery. So we have all that knowledge because we've obviously been building lithium-based chemistry batteries, but we've now taken that into our AGM technology and can provide a great, simple solution for an automaker, much better cost or price point for the automaker, and it's 100% recyclable as well. So that's why we're seeing the vast majority of people we interact with from an automaker perspective choose our AGM technology. I think 8 of the 11 vehicles you saw at the Super Bowl, during the Super Bowl, EVs, 8 of those 11 belong to Clarios, or AGM technology.
So what's the competitive landscape out there for you guys? I mean, you basically have this wrapped up?
Well, especially when it comes to what I call the conventional lead acid batteries, so flooded technologies, which are still a big part of the aftermarket. We're obviously the largest player in that. As you get into AGM, the field of competitors shrink because it is a more complex process to be able to effectively build an AGM battery. So we actually have less competitors in AGM. And as of today, we have more than half the world's capacity for AGM batteries as well. And we're adding more as we speak this year, next year, and the 5 years beyond, just to satisfy the demand that's coming in the car park. So as we get into lithium, there's definitely a probability of more competitors, but ultimately, given the complexities of dealing with a low voltage network, not leveraging the same chemistries for the low voltage network, we haven't seen really a big significant push into that from a lithium-based technology yet.
Mark, how's business? And I ask from this standpoint. Obviously, new car volume way down by millions all the world over. But at the same time, people are finding it hard to find a used car. And I'm hearing reports that a lot of people are starting to fix up their cars. So, OEM versus aftermarket, what's the landscape for batteries?
Yeah, great question. I mean, clearly we supply virtually every automaker in the world. So we have very large market shares around the globe. And most of the effort and energy, with our automaker partners right now is around BEVs and autonomous vehicles from a new, future technologies. But clearly with the chip shortage, Russia-Ukraine crisis has definitely dampened auto production rates. But even though we're the largest when it comes to supplying automakers, it's only 20% of our total volume. So 80% of our volume goes into the aftermarket. And so, as you can imagine, starting in May of 2020, the markets have been booming in the aftermarket, just given the disruption that COVID created. But more importantly, the disruption it created in new auto production has led to people keeping their vehicles longer. I think we're now over 12 years of age on a vehicle here in the U.S., and so we're seeing a lot of people show up in the aftermarket to keep their vehicles running. And so that's been good for us. We shipped more than 150 million batteries last year and generated just over $9 billion of revenue. So yeah, business has been very strong for us. And we've had a few issues as Russia-Ukraine war started in February. That disrupted the auto supply chains in Europe. And then, as you can imagine, in China with a more than a 2-month lockdown, that definitely created some headwinds in the market, but that seems to be quickly recovering at this stage.
To go back to the idea of working with automakers on their upcoming EVs, you talked about some of the benefits of the AGM batteries that they can be put in different places because of safety. Are you also able, or would it even be good to offer them in like different sizes, different shapes, so they can be put into different places, or do you try to keep them relatively standardized, again, for that aftermarket or replacement time at many years down the road when that part of the car needs to be replaced?
Yeah, great question. So when you look at battery sizes, we offer kind of from what I call a small AGM and H3 all the way up to the most largest of H7 batteries. So we have different sizes that can fit the automaker's need, use case, as well as some automakers you may know, especially German automakers may often go for 2 batteries. And actually have 2 batteries on board the vehicle, where you have a house battery as well as one that supports the powertrain. So those configurations we can do, and we already have them developed. So the good news is we're providing whichever one makes the most sense for that particular automaker.
Mark, is AGM a proprietary trademark of Clarios? Or if I see AGM on a battery, is that mean it's a Clarios battery, or is it used throughout the industry?
Yeah, absorbent glass mat is a type of battery. It is not owned by Clarios, but we have proprietary processes that allow us to basically build the most reliable AGM battery in the world. And hence is why, as I mentioned, virtually every automaker is our customer around the world. Virtually every automaker uses AGM technology. And so we've been able to do that really through proprietary process that we have throughout the world.
All right, so here's a public service question. Can you just jumpstart an AGM battery the way you can a normal lead-acid battery?
Yes, you can. So
That's good.
yeah, because it's the same, like I said, same chemistry
Uh-huh.
as the flooded technology. It's just a much more robust chemistry configuration, the way it's done with the AGM cells.
Mm-hmm.
We're good. Hey, look, we're at the bottom of the hour here. Mark, I want to thank you for coming on the show. It's been very interesting. Like I said, I never knew before that EVs had to have, a low voltage battery besides the traction ones. That's pretty interesting to learn.
Absolutely.
So thanks so much for coming,
John. Yeah. Thanks for having me, John. Thanks, Gary and Sebastian. Great to see you guys again, and I look forward to see each other again.
Okay, thank you.
We're good. We're going to take a quick break right now, and we're going to be back right after these messages to talk more about what's going on in the automotive industry.
How do Bridgestone tires stop shorter on wet roads? It's their HydroTrack technology. But you don't have to know how the science works, just where the brake is. What really matters is their Bridgestone.
The future of Michigan is extraordinarily bright. We have such incredible assets, and I think more and more we're realizing how to put those together in a way that's going to help this state really help lead the nation as we go forward.
All right, we're back.
And we are back. So Cox Automotive did its mid-year assessment of what's going on in the industry, and we've had Charlie Chesbrough, who's the senior economist at Cox, on the show before, and he made a presentation. And some of the information that came out of it was very interesting to me, and I want to throw some numbers at you guys and get your reactions. So they gave the number for what the average car loan rate was in May of 21 and May of 22. Okay, in 21 it was 4.45%. In May it went up to 5.08%. Okay, a significant rise there. They pointed out that gasoline in May of 21 was $3.05 a gallon. In May of 22 it was $4.67 a gallon. So we got the interest rate rise, we got the gasoline rise. How much do you guys think that is contributing to reduced overall sales?
Go. You want to take a stab at that, Sebastian?
Everything is so complicated and interconnected here, right? Of course, paying more for cars, of course, paying more for gas is going to give people a little bit of pause. I don't know, how many people are in a similar situation to me. We talked about the average age of cars just in the last segment there. My personal daily driver is now 15 years old, and I'm like, I can probably go another little bit here. And part of it is, the affordability of new cars. But then when you talk about people who are making the shift to EVs, that's when the higher gas prices actually pushes you in a different direction. But then you have the higher cost of them, the higher upfront cost of them to consider as well. So I would say, obviously they play a role, but we're going to get to a point where some people are making decisions to buy an EV based on the high gas prices. As we always see, whenever gas prices go up, they haven't been as high as they are now. But I just remember over the years, every time gas prices spike, people are like, I'm going to buy a hybrid. I'm going to buy a plug-in hybrid. I'm going to buy an EV. And some number of those people actually make the switch.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, higher gas prices, higher interest rates, low consumer confidence. That's always a recipe for disaster when it comes to new car sales. But I think we're in a different situation right now. Sales have been down for 2 years straight. In fact, I just came from a presentation that John Murphy at Bank of America just gave, and he figured we created 4 million units of pent-up demand last year, and in 2020, we're doing another 2 million of pent-up demand this year. So there's 6 million. And he says the industry will probably want to double what the inventory levels are now. They're roughly about 1 million. He says they want to take that to 2 million. So he sees 7 million units of pent-up demand. And he said, if all of a sudden the chips could become available and they could build all these things, there's customers ready to buy them.
Yeah, it's interesting that there seems to be certainly a lot of buying that's still going on for those that can afford to do the buying. So Cox did a dealer sentiment index, and they were looking at this. And so we're looking at a scale here up to 100. So in Q2 of 2022, they found that franchise profits were at number 82. Okay, this is the highest since Q2 of 2017. Their inventory level was at 25, which is like the lowest it's been in quite some time. It's usually bumping around in the mid 50s. Okay, now down to 25. So they're making money, yet their inventory is very low. I think that puts the consumer in a rather interesting situation there.
Interesting is one word for it. We've seen all those tweets and social media posts about dealer markups, and some of them are, I think, absurd is the safest way to say it. They're very high. My question, I haven't seen the specific numbers you're talking about, but that 82% for the profits, is that sort of on percentage basis? I'm guessing it can't be on
it's not a percentage. It's just basically, this is a sentiment index. So it's not, they're not saying that we're, so this is how they're feeling about things. And they're basically saying, yeah, we're really robust here.
Right.
Look, business has never been better for car dealers from a profit standpoint. They have never, ever, ever in the history of the automotive industry made the kind of profits that they're making right now. Inflation adjusted, I don't care how you calculate it. This is the golden age of being a car dealer. Low inventory, high demand, and they're just raking it in. They're charging over MSRP and they're making tons of money.
Is that sustainable, John?
Not at all. Not at all. I mean, here's the thing. In the United States, at least, the vast majority of people have to have a car. They don't have a choice. They got to get to their job. If they're a student, they got to get to school. We don't have much public transportation in this country. Uber and Lyft aren't going to fill the gap in most cases. You have to have a car. And so no matter how bad car sales get, and we've gone through some really bad recessions, including just over a decade ago, the Great Recession. And I've heard this 3 times in my career, big drop-offs because of massive recession. And people say it's different this time. It's never coming back. And I've always said, not only is it coming back, it'll come back and set all-time car sales records. And that's what's going to happen again. We're building so much pent-up demand that when the chips and all the raw materials and everything is ready, you're just going to see the floodgates burst open.
I just wish someone had a good timeline for when that's going to happen.
Yeah, I have no clue when it's going to happen.
Nobody knows. Nobody knows.
Well, I mean, so I mean, in terms of so Cox's, they said that they originally thought that 2022 would be a 16 million unit year. They adjusted that down to 15.3 million. And now they've sliced that again to 14.4 million. So this sort of gets to your point of this pent-up demand, John. But then we get back to this question of as Sebastian's saying, there's an affordability question.
Totally. Look, and this is one of the points that John Murphy at Bank of America just made. You cannot have a 17 million unit year market if the average price of a car is $45,000 or whatever it is now, 44, 48. We need an average MSRP down in the mid 30s to have a market that's big. So that's the one limiting factor. Prices have got to come down if the industry wants to get back to its former volume.
And this isn't, GM didn't do this in order to make cars more affordable. They did it, I would think, in part because the EV tax credits ran out. But the price adjustments they made on the 2023 Bolt and EV and EUV compared to the 2022 models, that's one of the first times I can remember in ages that the new model is that much cheaper than the old model. It's kind of fascinating to see what's possible. Whether we see that replicated anywhere is kind of a huge question. But I mean, how else are we going to get those prices back down to the mid 30s? Who's going to make that jump where they're like, well, okay, our cars cost less now and we're not going to make enough profit? Like that seems like a difficult thing for any, automaker to really push forward. No? Well,
look, GM says they're going to have a $30,000 Equinox sometime next year. And they're saying they're holding to that price. They say we're so confident we can hit it, even with, inflation going crazy. Still going to be 30 grand. So it's possible. But then if they make a $30,000 EV, what is the dealer going to charge for it?
Right.
If demand is through the roof, they'll charge 40 for it.
Well, I mean, it's all good and well to say you're going to do that. And that's very laudable of them of having such a goal. But I mean, so for example, if we look at the market for a small-ish car would be the Model 3. It starts at 47 grand. Okay. I mean, so that's a huge delta between 30,000 and what they're charging and making money with.
Right. But part of that is a lack of competition. I mean, Tesla's essentially had the market to itself. And now we are seeing more EVs, good EVs, not compliance cars, coming from the traditional automakers. But they're capacity constrained. They can't get the raw, enough lithium to make the cells. They can't get enough cells to make the batteries, so on and so forth. When the supply chain gets back to being somewhat better than it is now, and things start flowing again, Tesla is going to face a lot more competition, and is probably going to have to respond with prices at that point.
Well, are they? Because John, we also heard a presentation this week from S&P Mobility, which was talking about brand loyalty for brands.
Yeah.
And Explain it. You heard it. It's
Yeah, I mean, Tesla has at least amongst the luxury brands, and then we get into an argument: is Tesla really a luxury brand or not? But believe me, from the prices they're charging, they're definitely in the luxury brand category, and it has by far the highest owner loyalty. In fact, Tom Libby that you're talking about there, Gary from S&P Mobility cited, I think it was in March of this year, the Tesla Model 3, I'm going off the top of my head, but I believe he said 76.6% loyalty rate, i.e. 76.6% of the people who owned a Model 3 went out and bought another one that were buying at that time. So, I mean, that's an incredible loyalty rate. And to your point, Gary, he did say this is an ominous sign for the other automakers.
Well, I mean, a lot's happened since March, too, when it comes to Tesla. So we'll see if that has any impact on customer loyalty.
Well, so explain that.
Well, just the things that have happened with their CEO, Elon Musk, obviously, and in negotiations to buy Twitter, coming out and posting some really interesting things that you just have never seen from other automotive CEOs. So it's one of those strategies, I think, that if it's a strategy at all, but one of those situations where it makes some people love that person more, love what that person's doing more, and it turns off a number of other people. And I haven't seen any data or any surveys to see which side comes out ahead in that. But I don't in any way question that those results were accurate a couple months ago. I just would like to see some updated numbers to see if some of the some of the questionable tweets and behavior that Musk has had in the last, I don't even know when it started now, but last little bit here has impacted how people view him and his company.
Good question. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of hard to parse the data now. Even when, we'll have sales numbers tomorrow for June, but there's so much, up in the air right now. Tesla in China was locked down for a couple of weeks. They didn't make anything. So, everything's just a jumbled mess right now. But anecdotally speaking, Sebastian, I think you're right. I think there are some people who are getting turned off by some of the stuff that Elon Musk has said and done. I don't know if they're potential Tesla buyers or not, but I suspect they are. And we'll have to see what the impact is.
And it comes at such an interesting time when, as you said, there are really good alternatives in that electric vehicle space, whether they're from other startups like Lucid or Rivian, whether they're from the traditional automakers. Like Tesla does not have that market to itself anymore. And so if you are in some ways alienating part of your audience, they have somewhere else to go. It's not like 10 years ago where if you wanted a sleek, elegant electric car, you had pretty much one option.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and Gary, just let me finish this thought. So John Murphy made a bombshell of an announcement. So far this year in the U.S. market, Tesla has 67% of all EV sales. He predicts that's going to drop down to 11% by 2025. And he predicts that General Motors and Ford both are going to surpass Tesla in EV sales in the U.S. market at that time. He says they'll each have about 15%. And his analysis comes from him and his people looking at all the models that are coming, what they suspect they're going to be able to do. And I don't know if he's going to be right or not, but that's a massive market share drop. Now, we all know that Tesla's going to lose market share anyway as more vehicles come into the market. I mean, you can't go over 100%. You just start to slice the pie more thinly. But even so, Tesla will be able to grow its sales at the same time it loses volume. And as long as it's obscenely profitable, it probably will not worry about that.
Well, it won't lose volume. It'll actually increase volume. It'll lose market share. But so the question becomes...
Maybe that's wrong. I meant grow volume, lose share, but make money.
Right, because conceivably the pie will be getting bigger. Okay, but see, this sort of argument, and trust me, I have no love for Tesla. I have no love for Elon. I have no love for any of this stuff. But it does sound a little bit to me like back in the early days of the PC industry when everybody was saying, "Yeah, IBM is going to crush it on the desktop," and look what happened.
That's right.
We have this tendency to believe that it's the old incumbent, the heavy iron is going to do it, and so Ford and General Motors are going to make it all happen. Right. And and Sebastian, to your point, I mean, Audi has had, exceedingly competent competition for Tesla now for a couple of years. How's that working out for them?
I think I just saw recently that they're doing quite well in Europe, or at least in Germany, but that's also a different market with a lot of loyal, domestic shoppers there. Which I would say, like, some of the e-tron models, I don't know how directly I would compare them to Tesla. I would put things like the Taycan and the some of the e-tron name and the portfolio seems so convoluted with them applying that name to both plug-in hybrids and concept vehicles and pure electrics. So I don't know if that name e-tron has really helped people understand what Audi's offering. But anyone who goes looking for another luxury EV, you're totally right, has had options. But I just feel like we're in a slightly different time now, with even more coming out and some questions about the CEO of that other company, what he's doing and how that's going to affect the company. I mean, there's reports now out of California where Tesla employees are going back to work and things are kind of jumbled and a mess there. I haven't looked into that in a big way, so I don't want to talk about it too much. But just the sign that we're kind of hearing a lot about problems there that maybe hadn't always been as quick to come out. So it's something to note.
One thing, because I do know the numbers on this, Audi's e-tron sales in the U.S. market are not big, but if you look at them as a percent of total Audi sales in the U.S., they're actually one of the best automakers. Porsche, I'm not counting Tesla for the moment because all it makes is electrics, but Porsche does the best, and it's all Taycan.
Right.
I think it accounts for something like 18% of all Porsche sales, whereas the e-tron, and there's the e-tron GT and there's this and that, just call it e-tron, accounts for something like 16% of total Audi sales. So as a percentage of their own sales, they're doing a pretty good job. But Gary, I come back to that Tom Libby presentation on owner loyalty. Audi has the worst owner loyalty in the luxury segment. I had no idea.
Yeah, it's going to be tough for these brands. I mean, I just think it's in many ways, Elon has the first mover advantage, right? He's got a desirable brand. He's got a brand that people are loyal to. S&P found that if they own one, they'll buy another one. So as long as that is able to sustain itself, I mean, I think he's going to be in an awfully good position. But I mean, speaking of luxury electric cars, John, you drove a new electric car last week. Tell us about it.
Yeah, well, you did too. Cadillac Lyriq. My reaction is this: it didn't blow me away. I mean, the first time I got in a Tesla and drove it, and really spent some time in it, blown away. I didn't get that with the Lyriq, but I came away thinking this is a really solid vehicle. Whether it was ICE or electric, didn't matter. This is a really good vehicle. And it's the first real serious EV, I think, from GM. The Hummer EV, that's off in, loony land at over $100,000. I mean, that you could take that thing to the moon and it could run around there. And the Bolt it wasn't a compliance car, but it was a modified ICE platform EV. And I'm kind of down on those. So this is GM's first real foot forward with a clean sheet EV. I think they did a really good job on it.
Did you drive it, Sebastian?
I was not able to, and I haven't yet, but the posts I saw, the reviews that I read, or the little snippets, it does seem to fit in with what John's saying. It seems like a really, really cool EV. What was your thought?
Yeah, I'm impressed at the execution of that vehicle from top to bottom. From the Ultium platform to the detailing that they did on the interior to, I mean, every aspect of that vehicle, somebody looked at it. And I mean, I got the sense from talking to the people who were involved in the product development of that vehicle was, you know what, we got to make sure that we get this one right. This is basically the brand is riding on this in many ways. And their early numbers, they're finding out that younger demographic is looking at them. I mean, they're getting more Gen X, Gen Z looking at that and talking about Cadillac, which is fantastic for a company that has been lacking that. So I think they'll do very well at that, and I hope they continue to move in that direction.
I I hope no one at Cadillac was surprised by that result. Like that should be obvious. If you make a cool EV, you're going to attract the younger audience. That's just where the younger people are when they look at cars compared to the other people. Not exclusively, they're not the only ones, but I sure hope Cadillac expected that and wasn't like, oh, what's all this then?
Yeah. I mean, they did a couple of things that are really, really well. In Tesla, you get the big screen, right to your right as the driver. In the Cadillac, they've got this, what is it? It's like 32-inch screen. And it's one screen. It's not like a couple of separate screens that have been framed together to make them look like one. So, people are going to get in this thing, and the attention to detail on the interior blows anything away that Tesla has done. And I'm not even saying the minimalist approach. It's their use of materials is far substandard to the Cadillac Lyriq, and the Lyric's cheaper than a Model Y. I think comparable. If I've got this right, a Lyriq is around 60 grand, and a Model Y comparable is about 65 grand. And I think if Cadillac can get on the Tesla buyer's shopping list, just their shopping list, to have them go check it out, as soon as they get in the car and close the door, they're going to go, wow, this car just feels so much more substantial than a Tesla. Technically, I think the Tesla is still ahead of it. I know the Tesla is still ahead of it. But as a buyer, where you see, what am I getting for my money here? That the Cadillac interior blows away the Tesla. Even the Tesla S, forget the Y or the X. This Cadillac, they really did a bang up job on the interior.
But I think it all comes back to, I want to buy a Tesla.
Yep. You're right, Barry.
So, I mentioned at the top of the show about how Cadillac did do well on the IQS, the initial quality study that JD Power does, which basically surveys people during their first 90 days of ownership. So, those things that go wrong after you drive off the dealer lot and you've got problems. And it was interesting that they found that in the 36 years they've been doing this, they concluded that COVID had a negative effect on the quality of cars that were built in this period of interest. And, I find it interesting that, on the one hand, quality went down and costs went up. And so basically, consumers are buying vehicles and you mentioned the chip shortage. Well, the chips weren't necessarily there, so cars were being sold without some features and functions that they would have otherwise had, which then caused a decline in the rating that people would give to these vehicles. But one of the things that was very surprising, speaking of General Motors, that in the number one position, beating all other cars, luxury and non-luxury, was Buick. Where did that come from?
Well, in fact, look at that whole list of cars. The Detroit 3 brands dominate the above industry rating there. I don't think that's ever happened. Ever. And it tends to be Japanese and the Korean brands or Japanese, certainly at the bottom end. I'm talking generally speaking.
Right.
And so what a flip. I can't explain the Buick thing. I don't know. Maybe you got some ideas, Sebastian.
It's been a while since I've been inside of any Buick. In fact, I really don't know what they're doing over there. But, if people are happy with it, good. Just don't stop now.
Yeah, and to your point, John. So the list, the ranking is Buick, Dodge, Chevy, then Genesis and Kia are tied for fourth. Then it's Lexus, GMC, Cadillac, BMW, Ford, Lincoln, and then it goes from there. So, in terms of the top 10,
yeah,
General Motors has all of its brands in the top 10 in terms of quality, which I think is rather astonishing. So,
of course, what I like to say is, of course, everything should work for the first 3 months.
Right.
See, but isn't that the situation though, that it doesn't necessarily work for the first 3 months, that, you get it and then it does, like, oh, why isn't this happening? Or what about that rattle? Or, oh, the headliner just fell off. Stuff like that. It just seems to me that would be a problem that a lot of people.
But even so, Gary, for GM to have all its brands above industry average, for the largest automaker in the U.S. to have all of its brands above industry average, mathematically, that's just hard to do. It's hard to be the biggest and be better than the average.
So let me ask you if you have any sense of this. So the industry average is at 180. Okay, just keep 180 in your mind. Okay, so you have Dodge up at 143. So lower is better, right? So then we go below the average, and we have Ram, we have Jeep, we have Alfa Romeo, and at the very bottom we have Chrysler at 265. Now, how does that happen? I mean, that seems even more statistically bizarre than General Motors having all of the brands in the top.
What it tells you is that Pacifica minivan buyers are picky. Because that's about the only product in the Chrysler lineup right now. You got a 300, but they don't sell them worth beans. So it's got to be that minivan buyers are very picky.
It's got to be something. You got any ideas, Sebastian?
No, but I just wonder, like, what leads people to what are I would love to hear some of the specific complaints that help put it into this, lower category about what went wrong. Do they say anything about that? About what were some of the top problems that people reported?
Well, the overall top problem was infotainment. So people having the wherewithal to be able to, get Android Auto, CarPlay connectivity, voice recognition, which, by the way, I thought the Lyric had fantastic voice recognition. That was just astonishing to me. Touch screens, Bluetooth, and so on. So as it turns out that 6 of the top 10 problem areas in the entire study were infotainment related. Okay, so that leaves 40% of everything else, right? And so maybe that's what it all comes down to. That maybe if you have a very simple car, you're better off than a more complicated car, because there are more things that people are not going to become familiar with. Buttons and it's like,
but you know what, and here's where I take the JD Power stuff with a grain of salt. Ram is number 2. The same Uconnect connectivity system that's in the Ram pickup is in the Pacifica minivan.
Actually, it's Dodge, so we don't want to give. We want to give.
Oh, it's Dodge. Excuse me.
Tim Discus his due.
And another reason Dodge did so well, and I'm not trying to knock it, but man, is their lineup old. And when you have old cars, the workers can build those things in their sleep. The suppliers have got all their quality, all the problems wrung out of it. Older vehicles and older brands tend to do better.
And this sort of goes back to this thing we were talking about earlier, though, in terms of loyalty and Tesla, and Sebastian, you alluded to the fact that some of the problems that Tesla's having in terms of the build quality and so on, that is perhaps turning some people off. But so I wonder about that, whether there are certain brands that people just say, there's not a problem. That's
just how it is.
Yeah, I mean, just like, never mind.
Lowered expectations gets you a higher ranking on this list because people aren't too sad when the headliner falls out. It's like, oh yeah, it's supposed to do that.
Right. Well, you met their expectations.
Yeah, I mean, it was just like, so basically, I mean, if somebody buys, a car and they can't connect their phone to it, right? It's going to drive them crazy. Okay, but if it's a car they really, really love, they're going to blame themselves, not the car.
Well, maybe not, but here's the thing. Where did Tesla fall on the initial quality survey?
So while they don't officially have them because they can't get all the information, they speculate that if it were part of the thing, it would be at 226.
So not good is what you're saying. Lots of defects.
Yeah. So it puts them tied with Mitsubishi, which is below Alfa Romeo, but oddly enough, just above Audi. Audi's at 239.
Well, one of the things, and I don't know if JD Power does it any longer, they count things gone wrong. That's the defects per 100 vehicles that they post. Right. But, the industry's always talked about things gone right. And, so I'll use Jeep as an example. Typically, Jeep scores very poorly in the quality surveys, but they ring the bell when it comes to things gone right. People just love their Wranglers.
Right. Unfortunately, they counted a lot of things gone wrong, 199. So
yeah,
180 is the average. They're down at
right.
199.
But, I've tried to do this in the past. Is there a correlation between J.D. Power's initial quality survey and sales? I can't find it. I mean, I don't have the access to the raw data that they do, and I'm sure they can do a much better analysis. But I'm not convinced that scoring well on either the J.D. Power or even the Consumer Reports thing is going to turn into great sales for you.
Oh, but I'll bet you that if people find out about this, they're going to be at their Buick dealer and saying, "Hey, let me see what you guys have."
Let me get my wallet, and I'll take that bet. Hey, we're at the top of the hour. We should probably wrap up now, unless you had some other burning topic there, Gary.
We're good to go.
We're good. Sebastian, great having you back on the show, man. Always.
Thanks so much, and always great to talk to you.
Thanks, Sebastian.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks everybody for having tuned in.
We're off next week, so don't.
Oh yeah, not next week.
Yeah. Bye.
Autoline After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, solutions for your journey, and by the Michigan Economic Development Corporation.
Visit our website, Autoline.tv, where you can watch us live Thursday afternoons. Get your daily fix with Autoline Daily and in-depth analysis and interviews with Autoline This Week. There's all that and much more at Autoline.tv.